Welcome everyone to my first official Monday step-by-step tutorial, and we are starting with trigonometry. What is trigonometry? Well, make sure to stick to the end to find out and how to use Soh Cah Toa to find angles and sides in trigonometry. What is trigonometry? Well, it's basically just a form of measurement that allows us to find angles and sides in triangles, plus a lot more advanced stuff which we'll cover in future tutorials. Right, so the next few months, every Monday we'll be doing different trigonometry tutorials in order, right? So let's kick off. So with trigonometry, we're just going to start with right angle triangles. So in a right angle triangle, we have, in respect to one of the angles, which we call theta. So in respect to this angle theta, this side here next to it, we call the adjacent side. This side here that is opposite is named the opposite, which makes sense. And this side here is the hypotenuse, which is always true for a right angle triangle. So the only thing that changes is opposite and adjacent depending on where theta is. If theta is here, that's the adjacent. If theta is here, this will be the adjacent and that will be the opposite. So using this, we can now define the three trigonometry ratios. The first trigonometry ratio is sine theta, which we define to be the opposite over the hypotenuse. Right, so sine theta equals the opposite over the hypotenuse. This is why these are called trigonometry ratios, because this is a ratio between two sides. The next trigonometry ratio, cos theta equals adjacent over hypotenuse. Right, so the full name is cosine, but we just shorten it to cos theta. And the last, tan theta equals opposite over adjacent. Right, so this is shortened from tangent. Okay, so these are the three main trigonometry ratios we will use to find angles and sides in right angle triangles for now. There are other ratios, but they're introduced in later topics, right? More advanced topics. Okay. Now there is a great way to remember these trig ratios, and that is Soh Cah Toa. Right. So you see here, sine theta is opposite over hypotenuse. Look at this, sine opposite over hypotenuse. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. Cos adjacent hypotenuse. And then tan is opposite over adjacent. Tan opposite adjacent. Right? So you can see this is a great acronym we can use to remember the three ratios, and eventually we won't need this acronym, we'll know all of them off by heart, but as we're starting out, the best acronym to remember, Soh Cah Toa. Okay. So let's look at how to find angles and sides in right angle triangles using Soh Cah Toa. Let's start with finding sides. So in trigonometry, we now deal with angles and sides in right angle triangles. With Pythagoras, you just dealt with the sides. Now we're introducing angles. Okay. So if we have an angle and a side, that means we can find any of the other sides we want. So we look here, we want to find x, we have 5 and 40. So step 1, identify which sides you're given in relation to the angle you're given. So that's in terms of opposite, adjacent, and hypotenuse. So this can either be a mental process, or as we're studying it, we can actually write it on the diagram, which I recommend if you're beginning. So this is a given angle, right? So in relation, this is the adjacent side, this is the opposite side, and then this is the hypotenuse. So by writing that on the triangle there, it's going to really help you as you're starting out on how to find missing sides and angles. Step 2. Use Soh Cah Toa to write down an equation for the unknown. So at this point, we're trying to find x. So now we need to write down the appropriate trig ratio to find x. So when I'm starting out in the question, you're not going to be given Soh Cah Toa, so write it down. So in an exam, I see this question, I've labeled the sides. I'm going to write down Soh Cah Toa. So we look. I'm given opposite and hypotenuse. Which one is that? That's sine theta. So straight away, using the definition sine equals opposite over hypotenuse, I can write sine 40 degrees, because that's the angle given, equals x, because that's the opposite, over 5, because that's the hypotenuse. Step 3, solve the equation for the unknown. So you see at this step, this is an equation to solve for x, because sine 40 degrees actually just represents a number, right? All these trig ratios just represent some kind of number, right? Because these are trig ratios, and ratio just compares two sides, so obviously that's a ratio. Now to solve this, we go back to equations. Now there is a trick if x is in the denominator, so simply all you have to do, I'll write down a simple trick here, show you what that means. So here, to solve this, I'm running out of space, we've got space here. All I have to do is multiply, and what it means is multiply this number here, because we want to get x by itself, so that means I need to get rid of this number here. Since it's dividing, we'll just times it over. So x equals 5 sine 40 degrees. Now note, when you're timesing numbers over with trig ratios, place the number in front of the trig ratio. It's very confusing to put it after the 40 degrees because you might think it's a part of the degrees. So always put the number in front of the trig ratio. Now to find out what this is, we need our calculator. So comment below, but I probably should do a future tutorial on how to use a calculator and trig values properly. But for now, we just put 5 and then you find the sign button on the calculator and just type in 40, close your brackets, which I'll do a future tutorial on to show you how to use a calculator. And I'm going to put my answer to 2 decimal place, 3.21. Okay. So let's look at another example where we talk about x's in the denominator and what I mean by swap. So let's look at this example. So x is here, 25 degrees there, 4. So step 1, let's identify what sides we're given. So 25 here, this is the adjacent, that's the opposite, and that's the hypotenuse. So then we're going to use step 2, Soh Cah Toa. So I'm given adjacent and hypotenuse in respect to this angle, that's cos theta. So cos 25 degrees will equal the adjacent, which is 4, over x, which is hypotenuse. So step 3, solve the equation. Now x is in the denominator. So a great trick to find x straight away is all you need to do is swap x with the angle. So that means x equals 4 over cos 25 degrees, because they will swap positions. Because when we're solving equations, I'd have to move x over here and then move the number back over here by dividing. So I would times x over, divide cos over, which just results in swapping their positions. And now we use the calculator to solve. So we just put 4 over cos 25, close the brackets, and we'll use 2 decimal places again. All right, so that's pretty much how you find sides in a right angle triangle using trig if x is in the denominator or numerator. So let's look at how to find angles. So finding angles. Now the good thing about finding angles is it's the exact same process of finding sides. The only difference is how we solve the equation. So step 1, identify the sides. So this is in respect to this angle we're trying to find. This is the opposite side, this is the adjacent, and this is the hypotenuse. Let's write down Soh Cah Toa. So we have opposite 3, adjacent 7, that's tan theta. So then tan of theta, because we don't know what theta is, we're trying to find theta, equals 3 over 7. That's step 2 done. Step 3, solve the equation. Now here's what you got to understand. Tan theta is not a multiplication, so I'll just write that here. Tan theta does not equal tan times theta. Right? Tan theta is a ratio. It's tan of the angle theta. So to solve this, we're going to use the shift tan button on the calculator. So what that will look like is it'll be theta equals tan inverse 3 on 7. So this is not a power, this is the inverse button. This is the shift tan. So on the calculator, you'll see above the tan button, which I'll do a future tutorial on just how to do this properly, but there's a tan to the -1. So what that means is tan inverse. So what it allows you to do is find the angle from the ratio. So on the calculator, we press shift, tan, then in the brackets, we will put the fraction 3/7, close the brackets, equals. And we get 23.20 degrees. So for now, I'm going to leave it as 0.20 degrees because in the future tutorial, I'll talk about how to use minutes, right? If you want to use the minutes, we're going to use this button on the calculator, that button, because that button on the calculator turns degrees, minutes, and seconds. So if I press that, I get this. I get 23 degrees, 11 minutes, and 54.93 seconds. So most questions will ask you to round to the nearest minute. So I'm going to do a full tutorial on how to deal with the calculator and rounding degrees. Okay. So that's it for this tutorial on how to use Soh Cah Toa to find sides and angles in a trig. Right, this was just an introduction tutorial on how trig works and to find missing sides and angles. So make sure to tune in next week when we deal with probably more advanced trig problems with right angle triangles or the calculator tutorial, whatever. So that's why I want you guys to comment below, what would you want next? Do you want the calculator tutorial or do you want the more advanced trig problems? All right, otherwise I'll see you guys tomorrow.